Hello there. Welcome back to The Bleeding Truth. My name is Sally McNally. I'm the Irish midwife.
And I'm Bridget, Sally's daughter.
This podcast is all about women's health and some of my stories from around the world as a midwife in the labour room and outside.
So please like and subscribe if you like our stories and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. It's completely free and helps us out a lot.
Today's episode, we're going to discuss an unusual subject, the subject of death.
Yeah, so before we get into it, we think that it would be best if we caught up a little bit. It's been way too long since our last episode, so we wanted to just share what has been going on in our lives. So what have
Yes.
you been up to?
Well, I've been doing my work. I've been working full time, of course, and
Right.
delivering lots of beautiful babies. Uh, yeah, my life hasn't changed so much. It's your life that's
Yeah.
had a big change.
Yeah, I mean, I have moved, I graduated, moved to a different state. I used to live in California, now I'm in Texas.
Yes,
And so, how do you feel about that?
I don't know. I'm sad because now it feels like you're further away and I can't just drive to you. I have
I
to,
know, yeah. It was a
yeah,
long drive because we drove here. It took 3 days, almost full 3 days of driving to
yes.
get, the cars full of stuff here. But I think it's worth it.
Yes. And you brought a little friend with you, didn't you? COVID.
Oh yeah, yeah. What happened was on top of the move, I also got COVID um,
Mm.
during that travel period. So
Oh, yeah.
my partner got it, tested the day that we were supposed to leave, so we stayed back another day, and then I tested positive the day we got here, and so
Yes.
spent the next week after that, getting healthy again. So it's been mainly my fault, I guess, since we haven't posted another episode. But we're gonna
But
be
first,
back to it. Yeah.
you're feeling better. You're back
Oh
to
yeah, I
yourself.
feel completely fine.
Great.
Yeah. Today, actually, this morning I tested negative, so we're all good.
Yay. Virtual mommy hug
Yeah,
coming.
virtual hug. So if you're listening to this though, we will definitely be back on schedule and trying to post a lot more frequently now that I'm settled, and we'll be able to get those episodes back out.
Yes, at least one a week, right,
That's
Bridgie?
our goal. Yeah, at least one a week.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Also, I guess with that, today we're planning on answering your guys' questions at the end of Sally's stories today. So please stay tuned to the end of the episode if you want to hear some of those questions being answered. And on top of that, listener discretion is advised because some of Sally's stories can be a little gruesome. So listen at your own discretion.
Sorry about the gruesome parts, but yeah.
It's your bleeding truth.
Yes, yes. Well, my bleeding truth about death
Yeah.
is that I'm Irish, right? So we usually, think about death in a different way. Maybe, of course, it's sad. We miss our loved ones, but we always try to celebrate the person's life. We do a wake. It's called a wake, and it was called a wake because the person would be laid out, done up, cleaned up, placed, laying in a room with all their relatives and all their friends, and somebody would keep vigil over the dead person
Mm.
until they were buried, just in case they woke up. And that's where it came from. It's typical Irish, but
Just
also
in
it
case.
it came during a time when there was like different diseases, probably tuberculosis and various diseases that they didn't understand completely, and maybe the person would look dead, but
Oh.
somehow get better. So they wanted to make sure they weren't burying a live person. But
Wow.
this wake came and really as a comfort to the people, because instead of just sitting gazing at the dead body, they would start to talk about the body and the person and celebrate their life. So it's now like a kind of like a party that the Irish people would, uh, all the relatives would come in, they would view the dead person. And that helps too with grieving, that when you see that, yes, they're definitely dead, there's no, you know, confusion in your mind or
Mhm.
doubt that they're still alive. So it's also really nice that sometimes there's music and dancing. I've had a few relatives who've had that at their wake, and it it's also very can be very funny, like the
Oh dear.
the because the dead person is lying there, right, and people come up and they talk to the dead person, they tell them, all the great things they remember about them. But sometimes then they might go and have a few drinks and they might remember things that were not so good about them, and they'll come back and they'll tell the dead body that too. So it can be very interesting. But yeah, I've been at a few good wakes, all right.
Yeah.
But of course, when you think about death as a midwife, that's the other end of life.
Mhm.
But I see it just as important. Like the person leaving their body is very similar to the person like entering their body, or starting their life with their own first breath. To witness somebody taking their last breath, it's a very sacred part of the life journey. So I would never shy away from, attending a death. Like I would love to attend a birth. If I knew that person, I would gladly attend their death. So I've been at a few relatives' deaths. Of course, my own parents.
Mhm.
I'll tell you about that at the end. But it's a very sacred journey, and it feels um, really sad, of course, but also you almost feel the person leaving the body. Of course, I've seen some people not wanting to leave their body. Like one patient, before I became a midwife, I had to work on all the floors as a student nurse. And this floor was the medical floor, and this very old lady was admitted, and really she was dying. She was very, very sick. We all could tell she, didn't have long to live. And the nuns were very particular about cleanliness, right? And the
Mm.
nuns said, put her in the bath, give her a bath, and then we'll get the priest up and we'll say prayers and get around her. And we were like, give her a bath, she's like almost dying. And they were like, no, she has to be clean, get her in the bath. So the poor old girl, myself and one of my friends, I think it was Mary Whelan that was with me, we put the old lady in the bath, and we were singing to her to try and cheer her up. And lo and behold, the poor girl died in the bath. And then we had to try and get her out of the bath. And of course, she was gone, and we were trying to get her out, and she kept slipping back in, and because we had her all soapy at this stage, and the poor
Oh.
old thing, it was it was not a good thing, but it turned into a funny thing, because then one of the other nurses came running in to help us, and she slipped on the wet floor and nearly fell into the bath with the old lady. So that made me and Mary Whelan start laughing. And I I would hope that that old lady would have seen the humor around her death, and hope that, she was probably a funny person, and that this was exactly what she would have loved, the laughter of these young Irish nurses. But we did manage eventually to get her out and into the bed. But that old lady stayed with me, and it helped
Mhm.
me to get over death as a young nurse. And then I remember another lady. She was dying, and all her family were around her, and they were saying prayers, rosary. The rosary beads were there, and there was the sound of praying all the time. But we would have to go in every few hours to turn the patient, and
Right.
change her underwear and her pamper and stuff. Um, and we went in this time, and she was all wet. So we decided we would put a new nightgown on her. Um, and the relatives went outside. And as we were changing her, she started having these Chain Stokes breaths. They're the last few breaths that a person takes. Sometimes they can go for hours. This lady, I could tell she was leaving her body, and
Oh
I was
no.
pulling her nightdress down around her, and her little head came out, and she all of a sudden reached both arms up around me and got me into this tight hug. And I could hear her breath. And I was saying to the other nurse, get the relatives, because I wanted them to have this last hug. But she wouldn't let go. And I could hear her beside my head the last few breaths. Just as the relatives came in, she left her body. And, you know, it's like you would hate your relative to miss the birth, right?
Yeah.
Where are they? Are they in Jack in the Box? Could they please get here so that they witness, the baby being born? And that, to me, that she stayed with me too for a long time, because she was didn't want to go. I felt that she was like, no, I don't want to go. I'm scared. She wasn't saying that, but that's what it felt like. Whereas
Wow. Yeah.
the other old lady in the bath, she was like full of this kind of humor about her, whereas this lady did not. Was very sad. And then
Oh
I had
yeah.
another patient that stayed with me. Like, I've seen a good few patients, of course, die,
Right.
but these are the ones that are still in my memory. This was a doctor who was a patient himself, and he was dying. It was probably lung cancer, but every few hours his airways would fill up with this thick mucus, and he'd start drowning in his own body fluids, and he was dying, but it was taking a long time, like days and days. And every time I'd come to the bedside, I'd have to clear his airway with a big suction
Oh
tube,
whoa.
and he was trying to fight me and say he didn't want it. But once his airways were cleared, then he could talk to me. And he asked me to give him morphine, and more morphine than he was getting. He was getting morphine for pain. He asked me to give him double the dose, or he was asking me to euthanize him, right? to
Yeah.
to end his life. And I was telling him I couldn't do that. There's no way I could do that. um and he was so sad, and he sometimes he would get mad with me, and he would use his last little bit of breath to talk about that. Like, we'd clear his airways, and he'd say, Sally, I need you to do this for me. Do this for me. I don't want this. And it was
Wow.
very, very difficult for me as a young nurse.
Yeah.
So, of course, I didn't do that. There was no way I would do that. But
You'd get in trouble if you did that, but yeah.
this night, he was very, very adamant that that's what he wanted. And I'm not a religious person at all. Um, but I saw on his bedside a little prayer book. And I just picked it up, and he was like, I don't want this anymore. I don't want to live. Please help me. And I started to read the prayers out of his prayer book. And he went really quiet, and then I ran out of prayers because it was only a small little prayer book. So I started saying the Our Father, um, and he started to smile. And he started to smile, and he looked over at me, and he said, thank you so much. And then I left the room, but when I came back an hour later, he was gone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he stayed with me because I felt like he found some kind of peace, at the end. The struggle was gone. Maybe he knew he was going to die, and that he didn't have to like fight to die anymore. But that was very sad. But I know that being a nurse, we all, come across, you know, the so personal moments of a person's life, like
Hmm.
their death.
Yeah.
And it's really, it's important that we don't miss it, that we're witness to that. So, of course, I've seen people die. I have one death in my mind that I wish I could forget. And that death is from um, uh, an event I saw in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was there for a few years and very confident in myself, kind of thought I looked like a Saudi woman when I put my scarves and my yashmak on. I thought nobody would know the difference. And this day I decided I was going to go down to the city, into the inner city, to get a particular gift. I was going to get gifts, I think, for my mother. I was going home soon and I wanted to go to these place called the Gold Souks. They're little shops lined with gold, and it was really a really interesting place to be. But in my mind, I was just thinking, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to get her a nice necklace, and I'm going to get back home. So I got the driver. The driver, he would come and bring us
Mhm.
down. And he was like, "Are you alone?" And I was like, "I'm meeting my friends." I remember lying to him,
Mm.
because you're not supposed to be alone, right? As a young woman. So off I went. I just wanted to go in, get this, and get back home. I thought I'd be like 20 minutes at the most. But I'm wandering along with my yashmak and my covered up, and all of a sudden I come down this street uh, where there's all this shouting. I'm like, what on earth must be going on there? And as I'm walking, I realize, wait a minute, it's Friday. This is Friday. This is the day that they do public punishments. Um, and I had actually wandered into the area where they do public punishments. The souk that I wanted to get to was on the other side of this. And I'm walking thinking, oh, they must be doing public punishments. And I thought to myself, should I keep going or should I go back? So I stopped and I looked, and then I looked back, and the driver was gone from where I got out of the car. And so I thought, I'll walk around it. But as I was walking around it, this woman talked to me, and I answered in what I thought was Arabic. I
Mm.
thought she said something like, you know, who are you? And my Arabic wasn't good, it was like pidgin Arabic. And immediately she knew, and she started wailing and screaming that we have one, we have one. And I'm like, we have one? And suddenly I was rushed by these three women around me, and they pushed me in, and they're telling everyone, we have one, we have one. So I guess it was they had a Westerner, and it was a great thing to show the Westerner how they did their public punishments.
Oh,
Now, if
wow.
any Saudi friends are listening, um, you know that this is the truth. You know that this is how it happens. So, um, there was a hand up at the back here grabbing my hair, and that pulled my scarf off. And of course, I had blonde hair.
Oh.
Um, the yashmak came off. They were grabbing my hair really tight and pulling my head like this. And suddenly, I'm out in the front, right there at the square, and there's this poor man kneeling. Um, and there was somebody telling about his crimes, and I was too terrified to even try to understand what was being said. I was thinking, how am I going to get out of this? And they were making a big deal that they had this Westerner right up at the front, and she was going to witness this beheading, right? Um, because his crime was so bad, and this was the punishment. It wasn't until later that I heard he had done some armed robbery. That was his
Mm.
crime. Um, so this was just for a few moments, but it was so terrifying, and I didn't speak anymore because I thought, I can't speak. It's going to make things worse. And the woman beside me, she was just like squeezing my head and shaking my head and telling me,
Jesus.
if I broke the rules, this is how we deal with people when they break the rules. And you watch and you watch. And she was holding my head like that. And I looked up as just as they pushed the man forward onto like a big block thing. And they had him kind of leaning over this thing, and his hands were tied. Um, and there was two men with a sword each, a big sword, just like a regular big old shiny sword. And one came behind him, and he kept on fighting and saying no and trying to pull himself back like this. So the one behind him came and took the sword and rammed it up his bottom, right? And it had immediately made the man go straight out like this. And the other one came down and chopped straight off. And I was right there. So his head rolled off, and the blood then splurted out, and it squirted onto my black habaya and onto my feet.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and onto the shoes. I just was looking down at that, and there was a big cheer came up from the crowd. They were so happy about this. They were so pleased that this criminal had, met his end like this.
Wow.
But like immediately they started moving on to the next person, whatever the next person had done. But I'd never lifted my head. I just kept looking down at my feet. And the woman was just so pleased, that I had witnessed it. And, uh, and I just started to back out. I didn't turn or turn around. I just backed out and backed out and backed out and just kept looking at my feet. And somehow they just let me move off then. And
Wow.
I of course, went back and just waited for the car, looking at my feet. I didn't feel that man's spirit like leave the way the other people that I remember.
Yeah.
No, it was so violent. It was the most violent thing I've ever witnessed.
It really like it sounds like something you watch in the movies, right?
Well, yeah, and of
And
course, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like, how could that happen to you? But how could I have been so silly too to let it happen? I mean, I knew that on Friday mornings, this is, you know, what would happen down in the square. But I was distracted with life and planning to get home to Ireland for a visit. And I hadn't been home for quite a while. But I don't think I spoke for a few days after that. I was like, I couldn't bring the words,
Right.
I had to, and I couldn't tell anybody what I had done. Um, because everyone would be like, you broke the rules. You're not supposed to do that. It's so dangerous. Because just being a female on my own was breaking the law, you know. So that's my
How
most gruesome story about death.
how do you feel like recovery for yourself took after that? You said you didn't speak for a few days, but
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good question, Bridge. I think that haven't really 100% recovered from that,
mhm.
because every now and then, if I hear of, um, hostages being beheaded in, Middle East countries and stuff, I immediately see that in my mind. Um, yeah, I'm kind of like not for the death penalty.
Right.
I could kind of hear his voice, kind of like trying to bargain and negotiate his way out of it, and it was like such a hopeless situation for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and there was nothing I could have done to help him, and I was terrified for my own life. I felt like, oh, if I do anything, what could you have done in a situation like that? It would have been laughable, to say, wait, let's talk about this. This like it just couldn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, plus with that cultural
Yeah,
e- everybody cheering, right? Like
yeah. But
you
that I'm not the only person that's happened to. I've heard of that happening to
really.
other Westerners too. But over there, like, public punishment is a big deal. Um,
Who's doing the punishing?
Well, there's the Matawa is the religious police,
Okay.
but he's like a priest, but he's leads these police force that go around to enforce these laws. Um, and like a few times we were in like the mall over there, and the mall would be beautiful. Everything is like gorgeous, and all of the designer shops and clothes and shoes and
Hmm.
bags, everything's like so fancy. Um, but then you might hear over the loudspeaker come to such and such an area to witness the public punishments. And then we'd look over the edge, like the barrier, if you were like up on a higher level, and right down at like the middle of the mall, there might be a few men who were being beaten right there in front of everyone because they were looking at women.
Oh,
I've
wow.
seen that. Yeah, I've seen that twice where they denounce it and everyone would look and how interesting. Look at that. They're beating them because they were like following women or looking at women.
Wow.
So that yeah that would definitely keep keep them in line, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then they chop off your hands if you're a thief.
Right.
And the idea is that you eat with your right hand. At least when I was over there, that's the way it was, that you would clean your bottom with your left hand and you would never eat with the hand that you would clean your bottom with. So they would chop off the right hand and the person then couldn't eat and starve to death, I guess. Um, but we saw one poor guy, he had both hands chopped off. We were like, what's that all about? They
Oh,
must have
wow.
figured out he was left handed, right? I don't know.
But you did
But
have that other good story. Well, not good story, but the story of where you saved the lady's hand, right? So
yes, right.
I'll
Yes.
link that
Yes.
episode here
Oh,
too.
yes. Thanks, Bridget. Yes. That public punishment that those girls,
Nearly had.
yeah, that was so awful. But then also they stone people to death. I didn't actually witness a stoning, but I know of one girl who went missing. And she was a young Filipino girl who got pregnant by her boss. And she claimed that he raped her, and that's how she got pregnant. But they blamed her. Uh, so they stoned her to death. And the way they would do that, they would like dig a kind of a hole and lay the person tied up in the hole and then actually dump a truckload of rocks on top of them. They used to tie them and throw rocks at them, but that takes a long time, right? So the more modern way when I was there was to
Was she a
empty.
nurse?
She wasn't, no, she
Oh.
worked in like an office. But some of her friends told
And
me about her.
that happened to her when she was pregnant too?
Yeah. Isn't that
That's just
horrible? I
insane.
know. I know. Now, I don't know if they're still doing that.
Right. This was
Uh,
how long ago?
that was 30 years ago.
Yeah, you were there
Yeah.
early 90s, I think, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. But uh, so death is an interesting subject.
And
If you, yeah.
I was just going to say before moving on, why is it important to you to talk about those specific stories now?
Thanks for that question. Because they're in my mind, you know. When
Hmm.
I think about death, that's what comes up. You
Right.
know, it's like when I think about my own death, I'm not afraid of my own death. I'm kind of looking forward to it. I'm kind of like, I wonder what that's like. You know, it's kind of, I vision it like kind of like jumping out into this big, space. You know, I
Hmm.
kind of like would, of course, like to jump into the space with my loved one, Johnny. If the two of us could jump out in the same moment. But I'm not afraid of it because I've seen so many peaceful deaths as well, and I think being Irish that's helped me, because
Mm.
like the wake,
Right.
the celebration of life, but also I got to attend my parents' deaths,
Right.
um, and my mother, she was such a gentle, kind woman, and she had such a gentle, kind death. It was just perfect for her. Um, she died just a few years ago, and I was lucky enough that I got to get back home to Ireland in time, and in the lovely little um, old folks' home that she was in, the rooms all looked out into beautiful grassy fields and little rolling hills, and it was just such a nice place, and the staff were so kind to her. But we all got to be there with her, and her six daughters all around her praying. And I remember we'd go to sleep and then we'd wake up and talk to her and stroke her hand or her forehead. And but then I fell asleep. And then I remember one of my sisters saying, Sally, Sally, it's time. And as I woke up to go to her, it reminded me of a birth. It's time. And
Mm.
so many times I've said that to women, as they're just about to birth their babies. It's time. So sorry.
It's okay.
But it was really nice because we were all around her saying her favorite prayers, her rosary that she taught us all as little kids, and then she had this beautiful, gentle, just left her body, and we all felt so happy for her. It was really, really nice. And my father, of course, he was such a wonderful man, and his death was very similar. Uh, all of us around him saying his favorite prayers, talking to him, and I remember when he went to die, I got to like be very close to his ear, and I knew it. He was leaving. I'd been sitting there watching him all night. I knew these were the last few breaths, and I got to say into his ear, Daddy, you're the best father, the best husband in the world. We love you so much. And then he was gone. And I'm like, wow, that's so it's such a great memory. And I encourage everybody to, if they get the chance, to be at their loved one's death. Just like they want to be at their loved one's births, be at the death. It's very, very precious, sacred moment. But in Ireland, of course, then we open the window. We try not to stand in front of the window, between the open window and the dead person, to allow the spirit to leave.
Hmm.
So it's and then we close the window after a few hours, just in case they want to come back. No. But my father died the night, um, a day or two before Halloween.
Right.
So we had his wake on Halloween night, um, and he was all laid out there. He was glorious. That's how I always saw him. He was like such a wonderful person. But he would have loved it. He would have just loved it because all evening there was these little kids knocking on the door. Help the Halloween party. We don't say trick or treat over there. Help the Halloween party. And they were dressed like little ghouls. And I think somebody said, Look over there." And some of the kids said, "Oh, look at your man lying there. He really does look dead." But he was at a wake. It was my father's wake.
Oh
But
my
then we
God.
we brought him to the church, that night. We got around his coffin, and we sang his favorite song. We always want to put something in the coffin with the dead person, something special, a poem, a flower, a song. So we sang his favorite song to him, and then he went into the hearse, and everyone loved my dad, that knew him. But the hearse was beautiful, really old, and the guy that owned the hearse business knew my father so well, so he wanted to be involved, and he was there in his outfit with the top hat and tails, and he was walking slowly in front of the car, um, and it was a Halloween night, right? And then the two cars were coming down the road really slowly, with this guy walking in front of, the car
So it
carrying the
looked like
coffin.
a Halloween show almost.
Yes, and there was like little kids running here and there with their, Halloween outfits, and I often thought my father would have loved that.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
would have loved that.
yeah, he would have got a good laugh out of that. But I'm happy to say I don't see too many babies die.
Yeah.
The area that I work as a midwife, it's all mostly joyous, happy, life coming into the world. And I love that. But I have seen my share of dead babies as well. You know, babies that came in that were born stillbirth for various reasons. It could be something simple like a knot in the cord, or the placenta abrupted and came away too early. You know, and sometimes that's just heartbreaking. You see this perfectly beautiful uh, big baby, you know, and it's just heartbreaking. So, and now, of course, if there's like a dead baby, I kind of like feel like I don't ever want to see another one. I feel like there's enough in my memory that
Yeah.
I don't ever want to see it again. Of course, but we always try to help the mom and the father or the partner. Um, and they usually want to hold the baby and, you know, stay with the baby, and, you know, there's people in place to like help them with that. There's in the hospital where I work, there's a grieving committee that they actually get together and decide what's the best way to do this and to help the parents cope. That's so great.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, they're great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think when I think about death, because I have luckily not witnessed any,
yeah,
but when I think about it, it all my first thought always goes to the family. And
yeah.
if it's a hard death, then just thinking about how uh, much
Yeah.
pain it is for the loved ones, right? That's
Right.
always the
Yes.
hardest part for me to get over.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, if you're at my death in the future, let's have fun. Let's make it into something fun. Play some Pink Floyd or something for me, and make sure and open the window. Let
Oh
me get
God, you're
out
gonna have to
there.
write a list.
Because I see it like I'm going to be diving out into this infinite possibilities.
Not
You
yet.
know, I studied a bit of Buddhism,
Hmm.
you know, and I really like the idea of reincarnation. It's great. Can you imagine coming back and that was your great, wonderful life? You had lived a full life, and then you get to do it again, and you
Well,
get to do it better the next time.
that is that is how it is, kind of. But
Yeah,
because if you die and become part of the earth, then
yeah,
the same molecules that made up you are gonna make up other things. You're just not
that's
gonna be the
right.
one thing in a different
Yes,
form. You're gonna be in all these other forms. Maybe you'll be a mushroom
right.
in the grass. You don't know.
I love that. I hope I'm a magic
Oh,
mushroom.
you would definitely be a magic mushroom.
But that's the physical part. What
Right.
about the spiritual part? What about that?
Yeah.
That, yeah, yeah. So interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I'm not afraid of it.
Yeah.
And I don't want you to be afraid of it either.
Last time we were together, we were talking about green burials too. Do you remember?
Oh, yes, yes. Yeah, I want to be a tree.
Yeah, you can be planted as a tree
Yeah.
pod.
Hmm. Johnny wants to be a bench. He wants to he wants to put a bench in the park with our name on it so that you can go there with your kids.
Do it.
Okay, how about a bench and I'll be a tree beside the bench?
Okay. If that's possible, yeah. Yeah, well, we have two
Maybe that's
questions.
okay,
So
all
we
right.
can get to our
Forgot about the
questions
questions.
now.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say I knew this episode was coming, and I feel like I
Hmm.
was almost avoiding it too because
Yeah.
some of those stories are really gruesome. But I think it's also gracious, almost the way that you're sharing about the stories, and I
Oh,
like how you um, just put your own experiences out there. So I'm proud of
thank
you.
you. Thank you, Bridget. I'm trying to just tell you my bleeding truth,
Yes.
what I can remember of it.
Yes. Yeah.
I'll probably be in bed tonight thinking, oh, I should have told her about that patient.
And then we'll do it in the next episode. But since we've been gone, we've gotten like almost a backlog of little questions. So thank you guys also for sending those in. And we're gonna catch up now. Try to do a couple more in each episode. So we have two for this one, and also if you want to send in a question, we'll put that link in the description below as well. So this first one is from Brendan. I
Brendan.
think Brendan Henready, could be wrong. So he says, Saludos, Sally and Bridget. The podcast is amazing and so funny and interesting to hear about your parents and the family from a cousin's perception. The
Oh,
stone garden that was transformed into a piece of heaven. What do you attribute your desire for continued education and adventure to? I can hear so much of Pat in the way the stories are told. Hope to see you soon. All the best, Brennan.
oh, that's great. Thanks so much, Brendan. Love you. Mwah. Um, well, of course, I was the youngest in the family, and they maybe let me have a little more freedom than if I was the oldest one. So I got to like hang out with all my older sisters and go to movies with them and their boyfriends and stuff way before they would have been, so I had a lot more freedom, and then that developed into like a sense of like, what's next, what can I see, what can I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I love to see new places and eat new food and hear new languages and handle new currency, and it just like it's like magic to my mind. I want to um, keep doing that as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So not done yet. There's lots more adventures to be had.
Yeah.
But the studying, I really wanted to like keep going to see where I could get with it. But
Right.
also, I think it helps my mind. Like when I saw my poor darling mother with uh,
Alzheimer. Oh,
dementia and
dementia.
Alzheimer's. Yeah, that was really, really sad for me. And I was thinking, well, maybe that's going to happen to me. And I was talking to a doctor about it once, and he said, well, maybe you should use your brain cells like a muscle to keep on making them work to see if that could stave off the dementia
Absolutely.
for a few years. But there's a lot more things I could really focus on and learn. Like I want to learn how to play the guitar.
Ooh,
Um, yeah, um, yeah. There's a few things like that I
yeah.
want to do to like make the brain cells work.
What also happened was you were a midwife when you were in Ireland. And then when
Yes,
you came to the United States, the degree of like schooling didn't transfer, right? So you were an RN
yes,
nurse here, but you weren't a
yeah.
qualified midwife for what, like 20 years?
Right,
Yeah.
that's exactly what happened. Thanks, Bridget. Um, the recruiters that brought me over to America, they told me, "Oh, we need RNs, not midwives, and you can just do your midwife next year, your midwife work next year." But then when I got here, that was the case. The education needed tweaking, and it wasn't good enough, I guess, for the degree here because I hadn't gotten a bachelor's first.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. So then I had to I was happy enough to be an RN. I loved that job. Um, and you came along. So that kind of was a different focus for me for many, many years. But then when you didn't need me so much, I went back to school, got my bachelor's, got
Right.
master's, couple of
We went
masters.
to college, started on the first day together. We both started college
Yes.
on the first day or the
Yeah.
same day. But
For midwifery,
well,
yeah.
yeah, for midwifery for you, and then
Yeah.
um, obviously me just going to
But
college.
America's wonderful for that. Like all you have to do is like think, what do I want to do and be? And there's a way. You just, Google it, and all of these different colleges will have different ways. Like there was part of the education that I needed to advance to the bachelor's, um, and I was like, what? I don't want to go back and, do microbiology and um, writing. I think it was English writing and stuff. So there was a challenge exam that I could do called CLEP, CLEP. So I found a few of those classes. I just went and read a book and challenged it, and I passed. And I was like, "Yay! Keep going, keep going." And there's a way. If anyone's listening to this and they're thinking, "Oh, I wish I had done such and such," I'm really old, and if I can do it, you can do it. Just get googling on what the path is, and then take that first step. It might be 10,000 steps, but it'll be less if you start a few steps.
Mhm.
Just get those steps behind you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Brendan will go far. I know he's not done yet. I have no doubt he's already back in the books studying something else.
Very cool.
Yeah, he's wonderful. Hi. That's to Brendan.
Yes. And then we have one more question. I don't know who this one is from, but they're saying, how do you foster such an amazing, open, and honest mother-daughter relationship?
Oh, it's the breastfeeding. No, it's.
I don't know.
I
How do
think
we do it? Do we?
we're just really lucky.
Yeah, I think.
And well,
Well,
what do you think?
well, I think I've matured more, which has helped. I mean, when I look back, probably high school time, I don't think we had that type of a relationship.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
we never had like a bad relationship,
I
luckily.
know.
Yeah.
We're so lucky.
Because I don't
Yeah.
have any siblings. So for me, it's always been just you guys. And,
Mm-hmm.
family's mainly in Ireland. So
Right.
I'm used
Yeah.
to only having my parents, right?
Uh-huh. Well, and somebody gave me great advice when you were maybe about 10 or 11, and they had teenagers,
Mm.
and they said, "Sally, make sure that when she's a teenager, you got to remain her friend, stay her friend no matter what. Always let her know that you love her no matter what." And that always stuck with me, and you were easy to get on with. Oh my gosh, I
Was
was the
I?
grumpy one. I was the grumpy one.
Yeah. Let's say that. I don't think I was ever like very bad. But yeah, I
Oh,
think
thank you.
for now,
Thank you for that.
blame it on you. I think where we are now, this podcast has helped.
Yeah. And you know what else is helping too? I mean, my job, I speak to young women all the time about
Right.
their lives and their, private life, their, contraception, their sex life, all of these things are like naturally for me to just talk about.
Mhm.
And I just talk to you about everything.
Right.
Just, yeah. And if anybody is a conservative one, you're probably more conservative than me.
That's true. I probably am.
Yeah. Sometimes you're like, don't say that. You're all shocked.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. But yeah, I think we what's funny is how we talk here is pretty much the same as how we talk
Yeah.
anyways, except
Yeah.
probably less jokes. Because
Yeah.
that's what one of the other reasons it took us a while to record another one is I was home for a week with you.
Yeah.
And we had all these
Right.
plans. We're like, we're going to record an
Yes.
episode a day and have them all ready. But when we're in the same room, we kind of just goof off
Yeah.
and not get serious enough or just take a
Yes.
nap. So
Give each other back rubs.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So that happened instead. We actually do the podcast better when we're making it a
Yeah.
little more official, but
Yeah.
okay.
But thank you, whoever asked that
Yeah,
question. Thank
yeah.
you for noticing that, we do have a good open back and forth.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love it.
Yeah, me too. All right.
I think you're really interesting.
I think you're really interesting.
Well, I love to get to hang out
And
with
I
my
mean, I
girl.
do love this because these are, the stories that I've heard or kind of heard briefly, but, without the podcast to make us sit down and talk about them, sometimes you never really get around to talking about
Yeah.
death because you
Right.
don't want
Yeah.
to. It's a hard
Right.
topic. So
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like I get to know you better. Okay.
That's great.
All right. So if you're listening, thank you so much. Please like and subscribe to the Bleed and Truth podcast and share it with anybody that you know. Hopefully, they'd be interested as well. And I will see you in the next one.
Yeah. Lovely to think that you're out there, friends, and thank you so much for listening. We really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thanks a million.
Thanks a million. Say hello, Shim Sham. Say hello, Seamus. Seamus, look at your sister. Say hi to Bridgie.